Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the McFarland School Board Candidate Forum. I am Gail Bliss, your moderator from the League of Women Voters of Dane County. The election is April 4th. Voters will choose one candidate from the two candidates before us today, Mr. Tom Allen and Mr. Tom Mooney. I would like to thank WMCF for sponsoring this forum. Each candidate will be asked to make a 3-minute opening statement. Each question will be asked to both candidates, and each will have 2 minutes to answer, with the order of responses being rotated. Written questions from the audience will be accepted. Please write down your questions on one of the cards provided. They will be collected during the forum, probably by Eric or somebody. Questions should be issue-based. Personal attacks will not be read. With that, we'll start with Mr. Allen's statement since he won the card draw.
Thank you. I first want to thank Eric Redding for putting this together, and of course the League of Women Voters of Dane County. Gail, thank you. I also want to thank Tom Mooney. I've worked with Tom, of course, in the schools, and McFarland School District is very fortunate to have Tom in our community and all he's done for our schools, and very sincerely believe that no matter who wins the election, I think the school district's going to be well served, and I want to thank him for running. It's been an honor and pleasure for me to serve since 2005 on the school board. And I think primary differences that I bring to the school board and to the schools is that we have many employees in the school district, and they are bring a school perspective. I bring an outside perspective. I'm not affiliated with the schools except through the school board, and I've had 3 children in the schools. My youngest is a senior now. My background is I'm a lawyer. I practice in business, technology. I'm also a patent lawyer. So I bring some ideas from that as well. I've been a member of the of the McFarland School Task Force, Finance Task Force back in 2003. And I led in 2004 the Referendum Exploratory Committee at that time. While on the school board, I've championed the orchestra program, which we didn't have before, and I worked with the administrators to find a way, I think very innovatively, to bring that to our district in a way that we could afford financially. I supported the 4K kindergarten in the manner that it's in now. I know it came up before. I had some concerns about the local preschools, which are excellent, and didn't want to compete with them as well. Also the WIVA, the virtual school, which not only is a great opportunity for kids who need an alternate way of learning, but also brings hundreds of thousands of dollars to our district, which gives our taxpayers some tax relief in that regard. I'm always guided by the principles of what's best for students, and I try to listen to the community as best I can. I really like the community input. It helps to have those perspectives. And especially I think about the taxpayers. We have a duty to the children and the community through our schools, but we also have a very I think sacred duty to our taxpayers. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that even though our referendum passed 2-1, there were about over 1,000 votes no, and I know those no votes were really financial based. I don't think anyone dislikes our schools or doesn't want to support them. So I'm very cognizant of that too. So I want to thank you for having me here today, and I look forward to answering questions.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Mr. Mooney.
Okay. Again, thanks, Gail, for moderating this forum. Thanks to Eric and his team for sponsoring the forum also. And thanks for all of you in the audience today for coming. What I'm all about is about my background. And let me tell you the story of my early background. I come from a family of 13, born and raised in Madison, down by Tenney Park. 1 house, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, 1 car, 13 members in the house. Coming from a large family, we grew up knowing we had to optimize our finances, we had to optimize our space, we had to be really good problem solvers, and we learned to appreciate things that we had and those things that we did not have. And as I grew up, I went to Whitewater, then UW-Madison, And back in 1987, my family moved here. I have twins that went to the schools here. My wife and I decided that we would stay for at least 13 years and then possibly move on. Well, as the kids grew through the schools and as I grew through my position here in the school district, we learned to love the community. Wonderful schools, great community, fantastic families. And as you can tell, we've stayed here now for 30 years plus now. I feel now is the time to run for the school board. When I retired 3 years ago, I made that decision back then, that I would like to give back to the community many of the things that they afforded myself, my family, our neighbors, everyone throughout the community. The school district is a wonderful place to live and work. Like I said, now is the time to run for the school board. As I encountered many new families into the district, and I encountered probably hundreds of them, I would always share with them there are 3 major assets moving to McFarland. First of all, the children and the families that compose the McFarland village. Secondly, the school staff that their children would be exposed to and experience, K-12 by the way, and then the village itself. It's a wonderful, safe community. Primarily, I'd like to bring another perspective to the board, a perspective as an educator. I've walked the journey, I've talked the journey with kids and families over 27 years. Feel I have a good grasp on what is needed, what is wanted, what works, what may not work, and how to change some things that may not be working well. I'd also like to implement the recently passed referendum. Again, it's a significant milestone here in the district. Even though I've been involved with all the referendums here, all the referendums have been successful since 1987. But I would like to also continue my journey with the McFarland School District in a different capacity now.
Thank you, Mr. Mooney. Alternating questions, we will start with Mr. Mooney. What are the greatest challenges facing the district?
I think the greatest challenges facing the district certainly would be, number one, the budget. With cost controls, Act 10, the unpredictability of state funding. That is a huge barrier for us to move forward in a smooth and safe way. I think another is the mobility of families. Years ago, when families moved here, they stayed here. Now they come and go. We see the increase in poverty families coming into the district, and we must be prepared to help support those families so those children can achieve success. Thirdly, I think we have to build a stronger collaborative partnership with the village board. What we went through last fall with the land sale, it was an ugly situation. I think together, the school board and the village board acting as collaborative partners, dealing with space, programs, opportunities for kids and adults alike, will only make this village and school district even stronger. And lastly, I think another issue would be the ability to reach out to other organizations, to secure additional resources that would help support our kids in school. And again, at the younger level, we build the foundation for learning. And I think that's the area that I would like to see more emphasized in the future. We put a lot of resources as our young adults go through the high school, preparing them to exit high school and go on to higher education. But again, I'd like to see a greater emphasis placed at early education. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Allen, again, the question is, what are the greatest challenges facing the district?
Yep. And I think you'll hear a lot of the same from me. I agree. I think Tom and I, both being familiar with the schools, have a similar perspective. I think budget is very important. We did pass a referendum, but our philosophy on referenda has always been really ask for what's needed, not more. So budgets will still be tight. I think with that, we do have a changing student population in terms of their needs, and we do have to spend sometimes additional resources, whether it's special ed or bringing children up to speed of our district, especially children who come in open enrollment, sometimes they're not up to speed with where we are in terms of our expectations of children and their learning. I do think one of the other challenges we have is we're very landlocked, and on the school board we take really a 20, 30-year view. And our population is moving more towards Madison. Madison is part of our school district. And so in the next 20 or 30 years, much of our population may be outside of McFarland Village, and so we may have some transportation issues as well. In terms of working with the village, you know, sometimes when you read things and it sounds contentious, I think you know, that's passion. I think we have passion on the school board, and I know the village wants to do what's right for the village. So sometimes we do have disagreements, and in my world, we work through those disagreements. I think we have a good place now where we can move forward. With our referendum, we continue and always continue to work with the village because we do have lots of common interests. So I think those are some of the big challenges that I see, and like I said, Tom will see very similar because we both have very similar experience with the schools.
Thank you. The next question, which starts with Mr. Allen, is what makes the McFarland School District unique or special?
I only have 2 minutes for
You
this?
only get 2 minutes.
Well, I got to tell you, I, like Tom, moved to, and probably like many people, moved to McFarland even before we had children. We knew we wanted a good school district, and McFarland has an excellent reputation. I grew up in Madison and knew about McFarland's reputation. We moved here. My wife grew up on a farm, and so we split the difference. It was sort of the city, sort of in the country. But we came for the schools, we're staying for the schools, and even though our children won't be in the schools, I think the schools bring so much to the community. And I think the community really is so informed about our schools, and they take an active participation in our schools. They, even after their children leave the district, or even if they never had children in the district, they understand that good schools attract good families who appreciate things like education and what that does for children. And you really do see that that importance of education in our relatively low crime rate. And our students and our children are so respectful of the community, and you can see in the community the importance of what the schools have done just for the quality of life. And I think that's what makes McFarland unique, is that we have very involved, very informed, and very, really they care about the schools. And it's not just the parents, it's everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Mooney.
Okay, I will ditto everything that Tom said and add on to that. I think the families in McFarland are very supportive of the schools. And the evidence that I have of that is the amount of time our parents or caregivers, could be grandparents, provide to the schools, specifically in the form of volunteering in the classrooms for special projects, volunteering on PTO. It's truly amazing the involvement that our adults have in the schools. And part of that's because as a McFarland School District, we empower different stakeholders here. We empower parents, we empower grandparents. We also empower teachers. Let me share a couple things about the school staff. We have a mentoring program in the schools where we pair a student with a significant adult in the school that might just give the student a boost. We've had school staff take on select students, even when they're in early childhood or kindergarten, and they'll follow that student all the way up to middle school. Now, that's not required of our staff at all, but that's just one indicator of the amount of care and commitment some of our staff provide to us students. Another is where the staff will provide childcare to struggling families, or if an emergency pops up, they jump right in. They provide meals, they provide financial resources, they provide material resources to families in need. I think we have a very dedicated, committed staff. Again, the number one factor in a school setting that impacts student achievement is the teacher that is in front of them all day long. So I think as a district, we should acknowledge that. We should also provide incentives for that to continue and to expand.
Thank you, Mr. Mooney. Okay, the next question starts with you.
Okay.
What is your view of Governor Walker's proposed education budget, including his plan to expand the private voucher system?
Okay, the private voucher system I do not agree with. It's taking taxpayer money that's historically earmarked for public schools, diverting it to another type of school. Voucher schools have a place and time, just like private schools also do, charter schools. But the voucher school system is that they are not held to the same standard that the public schools are. And again, my feeling is if voucher schools want to receive public funding, then they should be held to the same standard, same expectations, and accountability, and accepting students, all students, into their settings, very similar to the public schools. I think with the Walker budget, his ability now, his willingness to increase funding for public education still falls far short from what has been taken away from public funding, what has been eroded over the past few years. And again, we are at a cross point now. We can't continue to fund all public schools, voucher schools, et cetera. There's going to be a bubble burst somewhere. And again, I think it's up to families, the taxpayers, the politicians to really sit down and think about what's happening in education, private education, and public education to make sure that this collision course that we're on can be diverted.
Thank you, Mr. Mooney. Mr. Allen.
Well, I do think, while some of the goals are laudable, the implementation of the voucher system really has had a detrimental effect on other districts. And it's not clear that it's actually having its intended purpose. So the fortunate thing is in McFarland, we haven't seen a great detriment to our district. But overall, I'd have to agree with Tom that I would rather see more local control and not have whether it's a Milwaukee school district or some other school district, have those detrimental effects on other districts in the state. They're not the only district that has problems. And I think the overall budget, again, is going in the right direction, but we are asking our schools to do so much more. And even those schools that are failing, it isn't the teachers necessarily. And the students come from homes that have so many needs. And to place that emphasis on the schools and say that the schools aren't performing, they don't get to choose their children like private schools do. And so public schools do a great service for all the communities. And I think we need to acknowledge that. And although a voucher program might have a laudable goal, I don't think the way it's being implemented really is having the intended effect. And I'd rather see some other approaches to that. And again, it really is because our society has changed. Our schools are being asked to do so much more. And we can't just say, well, when I was a child, we didn't do X, because when I was a child, things were a lot different, and we are asking so much more of our schools now.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. The next question starts with you. How will you make sure that the McFarland schools support all students, including students dealing with learning disabilities, mental illness, homelessness, bullying, LGBTQ issues, and minority students?
And that kind of dovetails into what I was just talking about. And I've said that one constituency I didn't see there was the gifted and talented students as well. We have, especially in McFarland over the last few years, such a diverse group of students. And I've worked with the Business Education Partnership and go on and done sessions with different schools throughout the communities. And some of them were private, such as Edgewood, or some of them were city schools like East or West and Madison, and some of them were outlying schools like Mount Horeb. And so you can really tell a difference in the population of those students. So we have limited resources here, like every school, and we do have to make sure we find those students that are falling behind, whether it's, or being left out, whether it's at one end of the spectrum or the other. And in terms of bullying, that's been something I've really asked our district to look at, because when my kids were in school and bullied, a lot of the bullying was very subtle, and it was from their so-called friends. And so having teachers, staff become aware of signs of bullying, recognizing that kids of different backgrounds, whether it's LGBT or whether it's poverty or whether it's struggling with learning disability, I think having our teachers trained to recognize that, and our administrators willing to go and provide those services and be proactive, I think that's really the start of it. And then we have to be mindful of our budgets and put our money where the greatest need is.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Mr. Mooney.
Okay, thanks. I think, first of all, I certainly would want to look at the data. And the school district does a wonderful job of keeping data. Part of that data right now does include bullying incidences, discrimination incidences, harassment incidences. So we take a look at that data. And over the years now, the school district has implemented some really effective programs to address those specifically bullying issues. PBIS, for example, Positive Behavior Intervention Systems. Along with that program, again, it's 4K through grade 12. The data is maintained, and the goal is to see an increase in assets among all students, which includes respect for each other and cooperation and success also. And again, the bullying can occur, as Tom mentioned, very under the surface or very blatantly or cyberly. And it's a real challenge right now. I think some of those locations are within our control, some of those are beyond our control. But take a look at the data, continue to take a look at the data. Professional development for staff, support staff, and for teaching staff, but also parent training. So, yeah, I think parents have to understand what constitutes bullying or harassment, because it has shifted over the years. There are programs that are being implemented, again, at the 4K level all the way through grade 12. And again, expectations. What I found through my experience is that if we have high expectations of appropriate behavior, most often kids will rise to meet that expectation. Those that don't, we have other programs or interventions to assist them.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Okay, the next question starts with Mr. Mooney. What changes would you like to see in student curriculum to better prepare kids for college and the workforce?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. Again, my background is more early childhood, and this is what I would say. When I refer to early child education, I'm talking about 3-year-olds up through up through age 8, so 3 through age 8. And what's happening, and historically has happened, is that kids come into school.
Yep.
Way too often it's like putting a round peg in a square hole, because we have the set curriculum, we have set programs, and what we have to do is do a better job at the younger ages of molding our curriculum, our programs around the needs of the kids, not vice versa. When I was teaching, I had a Chapter 1, Title 1 teacher tell me one time that, we have Title 1, a reading literacy intervention program for children in kindergarten, first and second grade. She wouldn't see students if they were identified in kindergarten or first grade, because developmentally they were not ready to read or to write or maybe do calculation. If you wait till they're ready and you provide a lot of support during that time, then they're more likely to pick it up much easier, and we don't have to label kids. I think as they go through the system, certainly at the middle school and high school, we start talking about career exploration. The high school does a great job, the middle school does a wonderful job at supporting kids, having them think about what it is they want to do beyond high school. What are their interests? What are their aptitudes? What are their strengths? And I think we drive them in sort of those channels so they can provide so the school can provide different experiences for them. School to work, for example. Internships are some of the examples. But right now I think they're doing a good job.
Thank you,
Yep.
Mr. Allen.
Thank you. And
Curriculum changes to prepare kids for college or the workforce.
yep. And I agree with Tom, of course, and I think I can add that, part of what we've done over the years when I was in school, it was called industrial arts. We now have tech ed. We have a wonderful tech ed program at the high school. We are pushing that down to the middle school levels and even down at the intermediate levels, where we get kids interested in different options for technology, whether it's robotics at the younger ages, and then as you get into the tech ed at the high school, it's really expanded to engineering principles. We have the traditional auto tech. Automobiles are so much more complicated now, so they're learning so much more about the technology and the tech ed part of it. And then we try to differentiate our students in terms of, not every student wants or desires to go to college, but those who do, we want to make sure that we have opportunities for them as well. We have the advanced placement program. We have programs where students can go to the university and take classes at the university if we don't offer a similar class. So in terms of curriculum, I think we, again, have a finite budget, but we want to span the full curriculum for students who maybe get a job right out of high school, maybe go to a tech college, maybe go to a four-year college, maybe have plans on going beyond that. And I think having counselors and teachers who understand that and can explore those with the students and then guide them, and also make them understand that, your choice for the next 4 years after high school is a choice for the next 4 years, and you may decide after that you want to go somewhere else. So understanding that everything they could learn in high school might be applicable later on, even if they choose a particular course right away.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. I'd like to remind the audience that if you have questions, grab a card and write them down. I was concerned we wouldn't have enough time for all the audience questions, so I combined a couple of Eric's to leave more time for your questions. And so we will move on now to the next question, which starts with Mr. Allen. This is another form of the budget question. Instead of asking about vouchers, we're asking just in general about the continued lack of funding for public schools and your budget priorities.
Well, one thing we've done in McFarland that I think is unique is we really haven't used the lack of state funds as a crutch. We are really focused on providing a good education for our students with whatever changes happen at the state level. And they will swing back and forth, we understand that, but we try to keep our eye on the ball. With regard to Act 10, for instance, there are some things that came out of it that I think have been good for McFarland. With our relationship with the union has always been, I think, very good. We continue to have a good relationship with the union, I believe, and we've set up really committees of teachers and staff that we hear and express their concerns about things that they used to negotiate about. And I think having that collaborativeness with the teachers and staff rather than an adversarial role has been very helpful for us. The other thing it's done is in the past, it was very difficult for us to hire good teachers from other districts because we had to conform to whatever our union contract provided. So I think if the funding were there, I think you'd see actually some teacher salaries going up. But again, we're constrained by the budget, and even to pay our teachers what we really should be paying them, we're constrained. And I've always said that I really feel like we should not take advantage of teachers' passion or educators' passion, and I truly believe they would do this job for minimum wage, but we really want to pay them what they're worth and attract good teachers, good staff by paying them what they should be paid.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Mr. Mooney.
Yeah, thanks. I think if you take a look at the data over the past few years, we are losing good staff from the McFarland School District to other school districts, private businesses, based solely on the amount of salary they can get beyond McFarland. And I agree, Act 10 has certainly been partially beneficial to school districts, but the greatest harm that it has done is we've been unable to keep pace with teacher pay, support staff pay. We say that we have fantastic staff, and I agree. I think we should put our money where our mouth is. And I don't necessarily agree that teachers will work free. They do have a passion for everything that they do, but there is a point of crossover where enough is enough also. Again, we rely on our teaching staff. We use teaching staff as one of our greatest assets here. And I think we have to go beyond just recognizing and acknowledging them. I think we have to reward them also. And that, one way to address sort of that budgetary issue is, maybe we need sort of like a 3-track pay scale. Again, one set for teachers that just want to work 8 hours a day and go home, and there's very few of those, by the way. Another track where we have committed teachers that go above and beyond in the classroom, out to the community. They take on leadership roles within the building, within a team, within the school district. And then we have a very small number of teachers that have passed their national board exams. It's the teacher exam nationally. And I'd like to see more emphasis placed on that, where we are trying to promote more staff to reach that level of skill and sophistication.
Thank you, Mr. Mooney. The next question starts with you. What is your view about the increased and frequent use of standardized tests to measure student performance?
Again, standardized assessments only measure one piece of a child. It's only a snapshot of what's happening with the child at that time and place. There is a place for standardized assessment, but in my view, we've gone way overboard with that. We spend so much time preparing students to take exams. And what does the data tell us? It's a score. Now, part of that, though, is that we use it for instructional purposes. We take that student performance level where the students are, we know where they are, and we can actually measure how they grow from one year to the next. And we can do what we call added value. And we can compare students' growth to themselves, or to a small group, or to a whole grade level. So that's the positive piece about it. But again, way too much time is based on one standard score. Rather, it should be an accumulation of their overall performance, their day-to-day performance throughout a whole school year, rather than just based on one time in place for that assessment to take place. I think also the assessments can be used for diagnostic purposes to measure what the students are learning, what they aren't learning, so we can go back into the curriculum and readdress areas of curriculum that they test poorly on. Again, that would be one of the additional benefits. But again, overall, standard assessment, there's more limitations, more disadvantages than there are just to the advantages, as long as we maintain the ongoing student performance assessment that we have always given on a daily, weekly, monthly basis in the classrooms.
Thank you. Mr. Allen?
I would echo what Tom says, and also that I think the fortunate thing in McFarland is we don't, we don't teach to the test. We understand that those tests are important, especially ACT, for instance, for college entrance. We've implemented other testing for measuring academic progress, where it is a snapshot, but we try to get more of a moving picture as well. I think in a lot of ways, the teachers that see the children day after day are the ones in a best position to understand what progress they're making, and then to put that pressure on the teacher to teach to a test, and the report card system we have for our schools. Again, sometimes I scratch my head. Participation rate of those tests is part of that. So there's a lot of pressure on the schools and the teachers to get the students to take those tests. And I can tell you from my own children, sometimes they don't take those tests as seriously as the state might take them, or the administration knows they're important. So in terms of progress on a standardized test, sometimes I think the true progress is underrepresented, because the students, I've actually heard, intentionally try not to do well. And so students day after day after day, and understand where that progress is being made or needs assistance, I think is really the key. As Tom, I agree with, have their place, but I think too much emphasis is being placed on them at this point.
This question starts with you. What steps would you take to address and help students dealing with mental illness?
Oh, again, only 2 minutes. This is something I think in our, one of the big changes from when we went to school, whether it's cell phones every day, texting every day, the internet every day, I think having children have that additional pressures, and the things we're expecting of our children in terms of how important their performance is to the overall school ranking, the report cards and so forth, I think creates that anxiety among the teachers, and then that's sometimes transferred to the students even at an early age. So we have to recognize that. We do need, and we do training with our staff to recognize when a student might be suffering from depression, may have some anxiety, maybe from bullying, it may be something at home. So I think educating our professionals to understand and keep a lookout for those signs with the children, and then having those resources. So now we've recognized that. What can we do? How can the family be involved? Is the family able to be involved? When unfortunately hasn't been too often, but when we do expulsion hearings, I'm always struck by the fact that many times the issues don't start with the child, they start with the family. So having those family resources too, not just for the children but for the parents, sometimes they don't know where to go, and the schools become sort of that central repository of information, referrals, and so forth. So I think bolstering those, seeing the signs, and then being able to effectively get the resources to those families and children that need it are very important.
Thank you. Mr. Mooney?
Thanks. Mental illness doesn't start with the older kids necessarily. As children enter the school system, we can see traits of some mental illness with even young children. And again, professional development for staff is vital, so they can identify those traits as they might be observing them, and then do some type of assessment. Again, when it comes to mental illness, it's on a continuum. I think many of us suffer some form of mental illness, even it be very minor or very significant. But that mental illness issue interferes with the child's learning and a child's social interaction with his peers and the adults in school, and most likely at home also. And that's why it's vital to bring on additional parent training so they too can identify those traits as the child is growing up so they can seek additional help. In McFarland, we don't have a lot of resources in McFarland. We can do outreach, and we refer children with more moderate to severe mental illness. But again, knowing where the resources are available to help support families is the number one step into helping those children be able to live with their mental illness, because it's not going to be cured overnight, but we certainly can do something to help them cope with it. Those that are around him or her, to cope with it also. Again, we've seen an increase in mental illness. I mean, years ago, we didn't even consider mental illness as an issue in the schools, but now it's readily more observable. And again, we see children entering kindergarten that have some of those traits, and it's up to us to provide earlier intervention for them and their families.
Thank you. The next question starts with you, Mr. Mooney. How does the McFarland School District assist low-income and disadvantaged students to participate fully, both in curricular and extracurricular activities?
I think McFarland does a very good job. Similar to other school districts, we have waivers, and if we don't, we certainly can provide those waivers. Children of poverty, obviously their families are at an economic disadvantage compared to their peers here in the village. And waivers. The issue that often surfaces is that it's not with school programs or opportunities that these children might be excluded, because again, we do waiver, we do have scholarships, the PTO will support families. We have individual families supporting individual kids so they can get on things. But it's more the private club activities that many of the children are involved with, and it's the private clubs that's more of a challenge for children of poverty to be able to join, because they're unable to oftentimes waive those fees because they operate on a strict budget. And that's where we have to connect with others in the community to provide additional scholarships, not only for school-sponsored programs and events, but for non-school sponsored events. And it might be a club, it might be different opportunities in the Madison or Dane County area. Also, it's vital to sit down with the family, we do have a social worker in the school district at the elementary level. Oftentimes, families of poverty may not even apply or show an interest in different opportunities or experiences that are out there because they just assume that they can't afford it. And that's a false perception, because if the children have the skills or the aptitude or the desire to participate like any of the other peers, it's up to all of us, be it school district or the community, to provide that opportunity to them, even though we might disagree with some of the priorities that some families place.
Thank you. Mr. Allen.
One of the things that's always impressed me with our school district is I think the empathy and understanding that our staff and our professionals place on the stigma of being, maybe needing some financial assistance. McFarland School District is an affluent school district, and so those who are unable to meet financial obligations that we might have, either whether it's fees or sports fees or class fees, I think we're very sensitive to that, and we don't, we do take sort of a very subtle approach and work with those families. We've done some things on the school board to reduce classroom fees. We talk about the state mandated free education for students, but me with 3 kids in the district and certainly able to afford the fees was still pretty surprised at how high those can be. And so getting that information out and then not making it a stigma for families, I think is something we've done fairly well. And again, we ask our schools to do a lot and serve a broad constituency. And I think some of the socioeconomic issues are some of the hardest because, one, the information may not be there. Two, there may be a stigma about it. People are aware of the, free and reduced lunch programs or some of the fee waiver programs, but they may not be aware of all the things that might be available to help their students participate in a manner like every other student should be able to participate. So those are the issues I see. I think we've done a good job with what we have, but there's still work to do.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. The next question starts with you. What is your view of policies that have emerged in some school districts around the country that allow teachers to keep or carry firearms in the classroom?
Let me first say that I'm not, in general, opposed to firearms. And I think I don't, however, support teachers having firearms in the classroom. I'm not sure that I would find that we would have the resources to properly train even designated persons to handle firearms in the schools. We do have a police liaison officer who has trained. I have no concern about that firearm being in the schools. I think what I look for really is preventive measures, and we've taken a lot of preventive measures for security. We're certainly not at a level of metal detectors in our schools, but we've done some things to keep our schools safe from those who might want to harm students. And we have to do a good job, and I think we do a good job, and we should continue to do better at recognizing those students perhaps that may have some issues that may result in anger to the point of bringing a firearm to school. I'm not so sure that firearm laws protect us against those, and we have to do other things as well in terms of educating our professionals and staff to understand the signs, the warning signs. Understanding parents are really a big part of that, making sure they understand that firearms need to be secured in their homes as well. But right now, I can't foresee us having firearms in our classrooms, and I wouldn't support that at this point.
Thank you. Mr. Mooney.
I'm strictly opposed to having firearms in the classrooms or in the buildings at all. I made a home visit a few years ago, and I was appalled when I went into the home that there was a revolver, Dad's revolver, right next to the door as I came in. Now, later, a few months later, that gentleman was arrested for drugs or something like that. But children are exposed to a lot of different types of weapons in their home. They don't have to be exposed to weapons at school. School safety, the school safety folks in the school district have done a great job at trying to secure the schools as much as they can. Recently, probably just a few years ago, everyone has to go through the offices basically, except at the high school. There's nothing going to stop a parent from bringing some type of weapon to school. Fortunately, in my experience, a parent has never done that. I have not been at the high school level, so I'm not sure what's happened at the high school. But again, it's built around the culture that you create in a community, in a school building, a culture of acceptance, a culture of responsibility for each other, a culture of knowing what's going on with your students or with their parents even. And again, it's a matter of expectations. If the expectation is that this is a safe, secure learning environment for your kids, then firearms in the school should not be necessary. The last thing we would want is for a parent to bring a firearm, the teacher to grab their firearm and have a shootout where there's kids around. There's going to be innocent victims as a result of that. Again, I'm strictly opposed to any weapons in the school. I'm not opposed to, in fact, I would support how can we further secure our buildings so something like that would not happen.
Thank you, Mr. Mooney. The next question, and the last question, goes to you first. Do you feel the recent referendum process went well? Would you change anything if you had to do it again?
The referendum process itself. I think the referendum process was highly successful. Personally, I thought it was a 50-50 thing. Yeah, I just wasn't quite sure. There was a lot of information that was received by members of the community, by members of the school district, about what was happening, the projected concepts that were out there. The school district did a good job at lowering the potential referendum from 75 million down to 65 million. The impact of that, though, caused a unknown consequence, and that is where the school district decided to build additional on the elementary campus, leaving Conroe Delvium unavailable for village use in the future. But again, that's water under the bridge now, so we don't have to worry about that. And I agree with Tom. Even though 2/3 of the community passed it, supported it, 1/3 did not. And I think the challenge for us as a school district now is to make sure that the monies that have been allocated for the referendum are spent in a very matter-of-fact, upfront manner. My concern is that $65 million for what the school district wants to do is tight. And we do know that there's budget overruns. And what I don't want to see happen is what happened at the middle school back in 1986, 87, 88, where we started to downsize the building. And we had to live with that consequence ever since. And as we're talking about building a new elementary school, building onto Wabisa Intermediate School, where the students are in classrooms, I'd like to maintain the integrity of the referendum for those two sites specifically.
Thank you. Mr. Allen.
I was very impressed with the genesis of the referendum coming from the community. Again, it goes back to, I think our community is very knowledgeable about what's going on in the schools. Many of them had understood that there were needs at the elementary school as well as other schools, and the facilities needed to be looked at, and I appreciated them coming forward and kind of starting the process. It's a long process, a few years, and I do think that one of the things I would have changed, of course, is finding different ways to get information out. It's always hard to get that information to people. We did hold informational sessions. We put information on the website. People are busy, though. They just, they don't necessarily always pick up the entire, all the details and nuances. The thing I was impressed, and I think we always do this in McFarland, we try to, is really be conservative in our numbers. If we say your taxes will be impacted by X, we'd like that number to be actually higher than we hope it will be in the end. We've been very successful so far. Our first borrowing was below what we had anticipated for percentage interest rate, and that'll continue to go. I think we used a very conservative growth rate and a very conservative interest rate. So I'm hopeful the tax impact is be less than what we anticipated. So I was very pleased with our district being honest with folks. Transparency is the key. Getting more people involved, getting that information would probably be the only thing I would change. And I do view the no votes as really, I just can't afford it. And so we do have to be mindful of that, and I intend that we will.
Thank you. We've come to the end of the forum. Each candidate will have 3 minutes for a closing statement. Since Mr. Allen started with opening statements, Mr. Mooney starts with his closing statement.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you for the opportunity to have both of us here. Both Tom and I have some significant things to offer to the McFarland School District. In fact, voting for either Tom, I think the school district cannot go wrong. I also want to thank Tom for serving on the school board for the past few years. Your time, commitment, and certainly your expertise have been appreciated. The difference is this. I've traveled the journey with kids, school staff, parents for 27 years. I've been there with them. I've been there for them. I'm familiar with much of the curriculum, the instruction, professional development opportunities, student discipline procedures, school board policies and procedures, the campus budget, the district budget, transportation issues, school governances, staff performance tools, student performance tools, school climate. I have walked the walk and talked the talk. I bring to the board that perspective. So as a school board, we can make better informed decisions. I think oftentimes what I hear is we do it in whatever in the best interest for the kids. And through my experiences, you could have opposing ideas with the rationale that we're doing it in the best interest of kids. Is that possible? Can you do this, which is opposed to this? I don't think so. I think we have to get beyond the political notion that we can just say it's in the best interest of kids, because sometimes I question that. But I will walk the walk and talk the talk. It was sort of interesting. I attended a school board meeting the other night, and they were talking about the elementary campus and the recent concept phase that they're talking about. An issue came up, and the board was sort of asking questions to each other about something, and I don't think they ever got the answer because they didn't have some of the background information. I sat there. I could have, if I had been called on, I could have answered that question right away. The protocol in a meeting like that, I have to make my comments under public comments at the beginning of the meeting. But things like that. You have someone sit on the board that's been there, that's done that can help. Do I lack some skills and information? I certainly do, especially when it comes to the secondary level. But again, once I'm on the board, I'm a easy read, I'm a quick learner, I can capture a lot of that. So again, I truly love the district, I love the community, the kids, the families, and I'd like to be part of that in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Mooney. Mr. Allen, your closing statement.
I can guarantee you two things in the outcome of this election. You will have a school board member named Tom, and that school board member will provide you with an excellent representation for our kids, and I thank Tom for his many years of service to our schools. I bring one of 5 outside perspectives. I'm not a school person. If I want a school person perspective, I can call on dozens, if not hundreds, of school perspectives within our schools. I think our school board brings that outside perspective, and I can bring that to the schools. I share the community's belief that we have a responsibility to provide sound education programs irrespective of the volatility of the fiscal policies of our state or our federal government. We, in our school district, provide a commonality for all citizens in our district, and our schools belong to the people of McFarland, of the district. Whatever direction our schools go, so goes the direction of our community, and we ask a lot of our schools. We ask our schools to reinforce at school what we, as parents, teach at home. We ask our schools to provide our children with an education and skills that are beneficial to the whole community, that instill values that respect the community's values, and to provide a structure and discipline for our students. We ask our schools to feed our children, both with food and knowledge. We ask our schools to inspire our students to go and do the right things, to serve our community, to work hard, learn as much as they can. And importantly, we ask our schools to use taxpayer money as if it were held in trust for the benefit of all our community. Strong McFarland schools provide a safe place for our children to continue to grow when they are away from our homes. We see the results of our strong McFarland schools when we see superior educational achievement, when we see respectful youths in our community, giving back to our community, and when we're impressed with the hard work ethic that our student athletes and other students and other student employees, and when we see them at local businesses and in our community. I'm very honored for the last 12 years to have served the community in that capacity, and I really thank you for your votes in the past, and I thank you again if you choose to vote for me in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. I want to thank both the candidates, Tom and Tom. I didn't have to pick which one to say first. And to Eric and WMCF. The election will be held April 4th. The League of Women Voters provides a publication called Candidates' Answers, which is an insert to Isthmus on March 16th and will be available at public libraries. School board candidates' answers are in Isthmus. We do not do village board candidate answers in print, so those are not. This concludes the forum. I want to thank the audience for their careful attention.
Thank you.